Welcome in, everybody. I am your host, Christina Long, filling in today for Matt Jones. I'm joined in the studio by Ethan Westerman. We're going to talk a little bit about Arkansas softball's weekend, hosting a regional. We are also going to talk a little bit of some big news with Arkansas reinstating its tennis programs. So we've got a lot to pack in today. But before we get started, I want to tell you about our friends at Bentonville Glass. They've been serving their community since 1971, and they are committed, professional, and versatile. If you're looking for a quality leader in Northwest Arkansas and you're looking for skilled craftsmanship, you can look no further than Bentonville Glass for all of your glass market needs with the highest quality products. You can visit them at 507 South Main in Bentonville or at bentonvilleglass.com. And we also want to thank our friends at Eggland's Best. When it comes to game day, you want the best in your lineup, and that includes your eggs. Eggland's Best delivers more of the nutrition you need with 6 times more vitamin D and 25% less saturated fat than ordinary eggs. Score now with Eggland's Best. Better taste, better nutrition, better eggs. Visit egglandsbest.com for more information. We thank them for their support. Huge news yesterday with Arkansas reinstating its tennis programs, just a little less than 3 weeks after they announced that they would be discontinuing them. This was something that really had not quieted down over those 20 days. When it got announced, there was a big reaction, and it really kind of became kind of a national story. And, you know, Patrick McEnroe was weighing in. He came on our show to talk about it. And so it was a lot of tennis people nationally were really, concerned about this. But also it kind of broke contain a little bit. And people kind of heard about it in other areas too. And so then 3 weeks later, they come back and say, hey, we've gotten this support from these tennis alums and these donors who have basically put together enough money for another 2 years about of expenses. Tennis, they've spent about $2.5 million on tennis the last few years. And so they've come up with a plan for $5 million. And it's unclear how sustainable it's going to be. I think that's the big question. And I think while this is obviously a really big win for those coaches and those players and, the tennis community, which is surprisingly active. Like, I think a lot of people were saying, well, nobody even goes to the matches because they don't sell tickets. Well, they don't make any ticket revenue because you can't buy a ticket. You can go. You can't buy a ticket. They don't sell them. And so there's, they're not packing it out like you're packing Bogle Park, but there's people that care. And there's people that, that are tennis alums that are actually all over the world. I mean, tennis is a very global sport that care a lot about this. So again, it's not a sport that's as popular as, say, softball or even, some of the other big women's sports on campus. Or some of the other, non-revenue or Olympic men's sports, but it is something with support. And so while you're happy for those people, there's also still a question of how sustainable it is. Mm-hmm. And also it's going to be tough for them even, especially now to recruit, because you kind of know you're a little bit on probation. The university doesn't value you. You know that they're ready to let you go. At the same time, you have support. You have people that care. And so that's important. But I do think they're a little bit, it's better than not having it, but it's also not the same as it was before.
Yeah, I was kind of thinking about that dynamic. You hear, which, first of all, 20 days between announcement and this just shows that the tennis community can rally, which is, a funny pun with tennis. But, I mean, they truly did rally, like, to generate all these donations, to really, let their voices be heard. That was really impressive, first of all. But my thought process was immediate, like, what happens to, like, are the players who were already like planning like what's the next step? Because that is a big, like news to get as a student athlete is like you need to get in the portal. We'll help. The initial release said something along the lines of like we'll help you out in that process, mm-hmm. making sure you find a new program. Like how many had already started doing that? I know that it was like reported yesterday that basically all the women's team, I believe, mm-hmm. was saying like, hey, they're coming back. But it is a weird dynamic that a lot of players had already mentally gone in that like mode of need to find my next stop, and now it's like they're back, but like you're playing for a program that like you said, like it's like, do they really care that we even are competing? Like you have your supporters, but is it even internal, like within your own department? Is it all just like these donors that at least you have their support? That's what's so weird about this situation is you have to feel a little bit, I would think, as an athlete, a little bit devalued. Mm-hmm. Even if you're happy that this all, got figured out and it helps at least the immediate future, because we mm-hmm. said, how sustainable is this? Got to be happy about that, but it is kind of a little bit of a mixed bag, I'd say.
Yeah. It's definitely, like I said, it's definitely better than the alternative. I also wonder about any, incoming freshmen that they have. They just spent the last 3 weeks going, okay, like, where am I going to college? And now they're able to come back. I don't know how that works with, like, were they released from, I don't know, letters of intent? I have no idea. So that's something else. If you're a junior or a senior on the team, awesome.
Yeah.
You know you have have a future. If you were a freshman this year, what's the plan? And maybe they are able to sustain it longer. I mean, college sports is changing literally all the time. People don't we don't know what, Olympic sports, the future of Olympic sports has been a concern for a while now, has been and nobody really knows where that's going. And we don't know how college sports are going to change in the next 2 years. It could be totally different. They talked about how they want the athletics department is seeking a $50 million endowment, and they would use 5% of that to cover the operating expenses for both of the tennis programs. That's a lot more than $5 million for the next 2 years, and that's not tennis specific, but as far as I know. But I mean, it's difficult to predict. But at the same time, it's good that they, the voices were heard. The people that this matters to were able to do something about it. I'm honestly impressed that they were able to get the meeting with the chancellor and with the athletic director. I think it would have been easy for them to not take that meeting. And so I think, it's good that they were willing to listen. And I think a lot of people have argued they should have tried to find out before. I think that would have been hard to do because the idea was you didn't want everybody to know that you were thinking about this, just because it would have caused a lot of anxiety as well. There's no good way to cut a sport. There's no, even if you handle it as good as you possibly can, people are going to be upset. People are going to be sort of harmed. But I think this is, a positive outcome for that community for sure.
Yeah. And I mean, like you said, there's no easy way to do it. They were like, going into the postseason. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, it was already hard to like make this announcement right before they play the tournament. But like, what happens if you make it a little bit prior? I don't know. I think transparency is probably always best, but there is no easy way to do this. And it all just set up in a way that, it's kind of awkward, I think is the best word. Like you cut a program and 20 days later you're reinstating it. It just feels really awkward. Right. And it seems like along the way, communication, timing, all this stuff, it just probably could have been handled better. But like you said, I mean, this is a big win for them. I am just curious to see, how many other, because this was such a big story nationally because Arkansas is an SEC. This is not just I know there's been a lot of other smaller programs cut tennis, but this was, the mighty SEC. You have.
And it's not common at the Power 4 level
at all
to drop sports. It's that common. Arkansas is not the only one to do it in a long time, but like it's not that common. It's not common,
and it was kind of more just like, oh, is this a sign of the time? So I'll be curious to see if there are other programs, big power programs in the coming weeks that announce that they're cutting sports and seeing if there's this similar type of support that they'll get to maybe I'll be curious to see how many reinstatements of sports we have, or is this going to be a very unique situation where you just had a really passionate group of donors at Arkansas about these sports, or is this going to be something we see common where power programs cut a sport and it really wakes up a community that maybe they didn't know was as passionate about it as they are?
Typically, reinstatements come because they get in Title IX trouble and they realize we're going to get sued, so actually you can come back. That happened to Clemson. They got rid of men's track, I think, a few years ago, and then they had to bring it back.
Yeah. And I know that was discussed with this. Like that was this had gotten brought up in the past couple weeks about could this violate some Title IX stuff. There was rumors about like women's flag football or something. Yeah. I was like, I don't know. It just, there was definitely, I think, probably some Title IX considerations that factored into this, but obviously like the donations that's what ultimately I think probably tipped the scale.
Right. Let's talk a little bit of softball. This is a huge weekend over at Bogle Park. You'll be there all weekend doing Razorback softball. We were over there at Media Day yesterday, got to hear from staffs and players from all 4 teams that are here. I really like Fordham. I really liked their coach. Their players were great to listen to. They were a really interesting team. They play Arkansas this afternoon. They basically, entering their last week of their season, they weren't a lock to make their conference tournament. They're in the Atlantic 10, and only the top 6 of the 8 teams, I think, or 9, make it into their tournament. And they were in like 5th, and so it was unclear. There was, they didn't really control their own destiny. It just depended how that last weekend shook out, and they ended up making it, and then they win the tournament. And their coach had such a great line. She was like, people are mad that we won the league again because they don't like us because we're obnoxious.
Yeah.
Which was an amazing thing.
I
to
love
hear.
the transparency.
It was
Yeah.
great. And then she kind of, you played it so well. Because if you didn't ask it, I was going to. Where you were like, well, why do people think you're obnoxious? Like, what do you mean?
You can't just tell me
No.
everybody thinks you're obnoxious and me not ask why.
Exactly. So you said, why do people think you're obnoxious? And she was like, you're going to hear some of our cheers. She said, we got some stuff that you haven't heard since Little League. And she was also saying, I like that she mentioned, Fordham is in the Bronx, New York. And she was like, we have that kind of Bronx attitude. And she said, New York toughness, which I was like, I appreciate that. It made me think of Mike Washington because he was not from New York City, but he was always very proud of being from New York. And that kind of New York attitude was very much part of him and part of kind of his background. And so it made me think of him a little bit, which was fun. But no, it was, I really like Fordham.
Yeah.
I was like, dang, these guys are cool.
And it's funny because we shared on our Whole Hog Sports social media accounts just the clip of her saying this. And it also woke up, I saw some of the Arkansas. Listen, softball moms are ready for a battle.
Oh,
in
always.
Arkansas, I've seen some of them, we're ready to bring it.
Yeah.
I love whenever that happens in these sports where the parents are like, all right, if y'all going to be obnoxious, we're going to be equally obnoxious. It's like you just unlocked that we're allowed to. Because sometimes if you're the obnoxious one, it sounds like Fordham doesn't care ever. They're going to be obnoxious whether you are or not. But it's kind of whenever both sides are fine with being a little chippy, they go at it at these games. And so I'm excited for that. I also think that it's one of those deals where once Arkansas is going to play Fordham first, and obviously the Razorbacks want to beat them. And then this is how it always works in a regional. After the 4 seed, you get done with them. If you're the 1 seed, you are just hoping for the best for them. You would love to see them knock out a South Florida or a Washington. And it'll be funny to see that dynamic of Fordham being this obnoxious team apparently and seeing Razorback fans get behind them too. I'm like, how annoying is this dynamic going to be for whoever the random team that they end up, I say random team, one of the 2 teams that they'll end up playing in the Saturday game. I don't know. It's going to be fun. I think Fordham's a team that you obviously have to respect any team that's coming into a tournament with confidence, and they seem not want to say overly confident, but they have no sort of hesitation right now saying that they're ready to play in this type of moment, and they feel like they're playing their best softball. So should be a fun weekend.
So what about the other 2 teams? You listened to them yesterday. You wrote a little bit about them. Arkansas could face either of them on Saturday. What do we need to know about Washington and South Florida?
Well, first of all, they both have legendary coaches. I mean, if you look at the active D1, coaches win leaders, let me look at it real quick. Ken Erickson at South Florida has 1,212 wins. He's 6th among active coaches. And then Heather Tarr, she's a little bit further down among the active ones winningest, but she's got 890 wins. So these 2 have combined for over 2,000 wins. That's the first thing you need to know. They've coached on Team USA together, so that's cool. But the big thing there, I think that both teams are dangerous. It's just you haven't fully seen them click in every facet this season. I do think that it's interesting that we have even these teams in Fayetteville. If you look at South Florida, because of how the NCAA tournament seeding changed this year, where you got 1 through 32, and it made it more equitable just as where teams were getting sent. You weren't always, geography wasn't the number 1 factor like it's been in so many recent years. South Florida had not, they're perennially a pretty good team. They make the NCAA tournament. They had not escaped the state of Florida since 2001. They had been to 14 regionals in a row in either Tallahassee or Gainesville.
Against really, really good programs.
Programs that are year in and year out gonna be good. And it's they're they got lucky, I guess, in 2001 to get sent to an Alabama program that's also
yeah. And now they get sent to Arkansas, which
is
also
a number 5
tends
seed
to make it out of a regional,
Yeah, but it's just they've got they're one of the probably best examples of why this new seeding is good, just to change it up a little. Ken Erickson, he's been doing this a while, but this was even new for him. He was like, man, this just first of all feels good to be somewhere else in the postseason. It's got to be pretty frustrating to always know your postseason route, how it's going to go, which for Arkansas for the longest time, it was the same way because they were never hosting and they were always getting sent to Norman. It was just go to Murderer's Row, I guess, in Norman and face Oklahoma. You'll never make it out of there alive. So it's nice to see these types of changes. And then, Washington, they're always really good, but this year it's they kind of stumbled down end of the season. They're not playing their best at all right now going into this. But they have the potential to all of a sudden maybe flip the switch. They've been ranked as high as 14th this year whenever they were 15-0 to start Big Ten play. They went undefeated in March, and then since then it's just been kind of bumpy for them. But, all teams are good in the postseason. I think Arkansas has a draw that you look at it and you definitely see a path of making it out of there and making it to a super regional, but you can't count out any of these teams.
And Kaylin DeBoer's daughter
Yes.
is a player for Washington and like one of their best
Yeah,
players. She came into the media room, which typically they're bringing good players in the media room.
She's not like you said, she's not just like any player. She's really, really good. I mean, she was a sophomore this year. I think last year maybe was like a top 10 finalist for freshman of the year.
I wonder if Alabama recruited her ever, like when she was in high school.
Well, we found out that Arkansas did because I asked her. So yeah, I asked them. I was like, being from Washington, have y'all ever been to Arkansas before? And teammate said, no, this is the first time. Coach, I think, might have been the first time. And then Alexis DeBoer's like, yeah, I've been here a couple times. It's nice that the sun's out today. But I was like, why were you here?
Yeah.
And I fully expected her to maybe say like football, like because just throughout the years, some sort of game that brought her here. She's like, no, I actually took a visit with the Razorbacks. So Courtney Deifel and company recruited Kaylin DeBoer's daughter. I guess she chose to stay West Coast, where Washington is where Kaylin DeBoer was coaching. But yeah, it's she's really good. She's one of their. I'd probably pinpoint her as their best player.
So what else do we need to know kind of about this regional? What are you going to be watching for Arkansas to do? Is there, they're a team that's really clicking. They're a team that doesn't have a huge weakness. That was something you wrote about was, there's not a big hole in their game that you're kind of getting some anxiety about. But is there anything, if somebody's going to do it, if somebody's going to knock off Arkansas, or if Arkansas is not going to make it, what goes wrong? Or what does Arkansas need to do right in order to make it out of this regional? I just think that the bats just weren't there. I think that's like, I look at this regional and that is the pathway for one of these teams to beat Arkansas is they just shut down the bats, and it's Arkansas. Arkansas has great pitching that can keep them, I think, in any game at this regional. I don't think that they're going to, we've seen some regionals in the past. I think about Oregon a few years ago. It got out of hand. Even a few years ago against Villanova, where it just kind of fell apart and it got ugly toward the end. I don't see that happening this year because I think Arkansas has the pitching to keep them at minimum in a low-scoring game. But I think the path for Arkansas to not make it out would just have to be that it just not good adjustments at the plate, not good at bats, and because this is a regional full of pretty good pitching. I mean, Washington, I would say it's kind of interesting because their pitching has been really good at times this year, but in some of their losses to regional host teams, because I think they're off the top of my head, like 2-12 against regional hosts this year. And in those losses, maybe 2-10, they've played 12 games. In those 10 losses, they've given up an average of like 8 runs a game. I think it's 7.8, so round up. So their pitching hasn't been great a lot of times in the bigger games against the better teams. So they're the one that I'm like, how will the pitching look? But South Florida has an ace. Ann Long, I joked with you, your long-lost cousin. She's really good. She was the American Conference Pitcher of the Year, lowest ERA of the regional, I think, 1.69. She's 13th nationally ERA. She's really good. South Florida, I think, will go as far as she carries them. I mean, her arm, if they're going to make it out of this regional, probably her arm's going to be needing an ice bath on Sunday. And then Fordham, they've got, kind of a workhorse in the circle, like their ace, Olivia Simcoe, I believe is her name, that she'll probably carry most of the load. But there's good pitching throughout the regional. It's going to be which bats, I think, are the strongest to complement the pitching. And I think Arkansas, you look at the numbers, they have the best offense of the regional. That's been the case for the season as a whole. But late in the season, Arkansas, it just hasn't looked the same. And I think there's times that maybe you're kind of thankful that that's like happened, because like during the course of a season it's really hard to sustain this level of offensive success, that where maybe you're glad that the lull happened toward the end of SEC play against the likes of Alabama and in the tournament, Texas. Like, you faced good pitching for this to happen, but maybe like this is just a good reset and your stats usually average back out. I could see it either continuing into this regional where just things aren't clicking how they were at the beginning of the year, or I could see them just snapping out of it and kind of going crazy. I think that Fordham specifically, it would be good for them to start this tournament today with just putting up a lot of runs, because that kind of gets the good vibes flowing back in your direction.
so much of, I think, baseball, softball is so mental. And I think that just seeing yourself do it again, just like get back to that form that, could put up runs in a hurry a lot of times this season, that would be really good for them against Fordham to just kind of set up that next game Saturday.
One thing that was really interesting from Courtney Deifel's press conference yesterday, which we also clipped on our social media, was her talking about, she was asked about last year, losing in the home super regional to Ole Miss, when it really felt like that was maybe a team that could do it, that could get to their first Women's College World Series, could get them to Oklahoma City for the first time. And, they had their, pitchers get sick. They had, that kind of adversity that you just can't control. And then they had that heartbreaking loss. And she was asked about, like, okay, a lot of players are back from that team. What's kind of the vibe? What's the mentality? How much are you thinking about that? And she basically was like, we're not really. She was like, we know we're gonna have to talk about it with you guys because it's gonna be something that's talked about at the regional. If they advance, it's gonna get talked about at the super regional. It's gonna get talked about. The fact that they haven't made it to Oklahoma City is gonna get talked about every year until they do. And she basically said, hey, the players that were on that team, they know what it felt like, and they don't want to feel it again. We don't have to tell them. We don't have to remind them, like, they know. And so I thought that was really interesting because I do think, for somebody like Robin Herron, who got sick and was limited in that series, this is her last year. Like, she really wants it. She's been such a great, star for them. A lot of that group of seniors, they were, several of them, most of them were here. And I think it's interesting, the Oklahoma City thing has hung over this program's head before, but now they also have the reminder of how they were so close last year and how this year feels like a really complete team, which is what you need to make it to Oklahoma City. Is this going to be the year this time?
Yeah, and they've hosted 6 years in a row, and so they've had 5 results. This is the 6th year. So every single senior that's been with this program, they have a couple transfers, but they have a lot of long tenured seniors with Robin Herron, Reagan Johnson, Natalia Rijo. You even think about Reese Burline. She transferred after her freshman year. So they have a lot of players who have been here for a while, and they have never felt not having their season end on their home field. I think those are the ones that probably feel it the most, but they're not trying to dwell on it, I think, because I think you get to this point here and you just know it's a different team than you've had in the past. It just feels different. I think last year's team, like, I'll die by this, that I think they were a Women's College World Series, like, quality team, and they showed it throughout the year. Things didn't go their way on one weekend and season's over. But it is interesting because I think that they have to feel it. You can't, as much as you can not dwell on it, I think you still have to feel it, and you'll wonder how they'll perform in those sort of, high tension moments in a regional that kind of reveal a team's ability to bounce back. Like, if something doesn't go your way, how much is that weighing on them? But it is interesting because, Courtney Deifel says that, and of course it's going to be asked. Like, that's been the story for 5 years in a row that you've lost in your home field. It's going to get asked, and I think they know that, and that's why she alluded to, like, we knew it would come from y'all more. But
I'm sure she's tired of hearing about it, but she's also tired of it happening.
Exactly.
Like, Courtney Deifel wants to win.
Like, she's like, she knows it's coming, and that's what I think, like, have to realize is, like, we always have to ask, like, how much have y'all talked about it, and, like, what would that even look like if they were to talk about it? Like, hey guys, what does it help? I think this is what I'm mainly getting at is, like, they could talk about it, I guess, but does that help?
They all know. They've all felt those that were here, those that weren't here, they've heard. Those that were here, they remember. They don't need you to be. They haven't forgotten.
There's nobody who wants to succeed and make it past that more than those players and that coaching staff. And so, what does it help to dwell on, like, that it hasn't happened when it's understood? They know. And they also, I think, know that this team is different. I've covered them for every single one of these losses, going back to even the 2021 Super Regional against Arizona. And things just feel different this year. I just, like, they felt different last year too, and then that situation.
You just never know.
You just never know. But this team feels a lot different than a lot of those teams that lost on their home field, as far as you just see the vision as far as pitching, hitting, defense, all top 15 nationally. Like, that's what you got to have, and that's not been the case always in every facet for the Razorbacks. So, could history repeat itself? Absolutely, and they'll get asked about it again next year, because I promise they'll be back being good, because they've built a program that's consistently good. But I think it's just, the monkey on their back, they just want off. Like, it's like, can we stop talking about the past? But they also know that's part of it.
Yeah, exactly. You've got to ask the question, but at the same time, like, they're aware.
Yeah.
With the possibility of them advancing, they match up with the Durham regional that Duke is hosting, right? And who's the number 2 in that region? Do you know off the top of your head?
Yes, it's Arizona, which I think they would almost
yeah.
rather, just with like what we're talking about, this like weighing on them, and
Yeah.
Arizona has ended their season on their like multiple times,
Yeah.
and they've played like I would need to crunch these numbers for somebody like Robin Herron. She has probably faced Arizona in her college career more than, I'd be willing to say, maybe more than any SEC team. Like, they have played so much to where it feels like Arizona is like an honorary rival for Arkansas because they've played regular season some, then they happenstance met in the postseason that same year, played, and they just played a lot. I think that you're at that point where Arizona's been such just like a postseason demon, I guess, that you maybe would rather the host advance out of Durham with Duke.
Counterpoint.
Yeah.
The narrative of if they were to beat Arizona to go to Oklahoma City, imagine that your story would write itself.
Yeah.
You would have to do so little work.
Yeah, that like maybe if you're gonna go all in on trying to rewrite narratives, just go all in. Like at this point, just face every single one of your demons.
Story.
It's funny because this like they got eliminated 2021 on their home field by Arizona in a super regional, and it was like they had the chance to do this already a couple years ago when they got sent for a regional, and maybe it's like, third time's the charm.
Hey.
But I don't know. You get to a super regional and whoever you're playing is really good. Like, to where there's really not a great avenue. I just think maybe it would help to not see the same old team that's haunted you some. Also, Dakota Kennedy transferred from Arizona.
Yeah,
and I don't know how helpful that would be to be playing your old teammates in a high leverage.
Because none of the players on this team would have been there for the Arizona when they played them, like
in 2021.
When they would have ended their season, obviously.
They would have been 2 years ago for the regionals, but not supers, not ever like on the doorstep of making OKC.
Right,
but
that's true.
And a couple years ago, that's the one that Arizona beat them in a really close game that I believe Robin Herron was actually pitching. I think it was 2-1 was maybe the score, and then Arkansas had to fight out of the losers bracket and couldn't do that. Lost to Villanova that night. But these teams, like, they're so familiar with Arizona, and it just would be wild to see them play again because it feels like Arkansas and Arizona at this point, it's a rivalry, which it's just odd that would be the case.
A lot has to happen before we get to that point, but if that did happen, Courtney's going to be so excited to answer questions.
Yeah, she's going to show up to that press conference.
I know what you're going to say.
Exactly. And she's funny in press conferences too, as far as like she will just, before you even can say this or say, like, you'll start to say something and she's like, I knew that was coming right away. But she'll, they've reached a point where they know all the tough questions will come, but I think that they kind of don't care right now.
Yeah.
That's a good place to be in, I think, to be comfortable enough with the truth of what's happened that you don't care anymore to like dwell on it. So, yeah.
Ethan's going to be out at Bogle Park all weekend covering softball. We will have all kinds of stories, all kinds of videos on our social media. We're really excited about postseason softball. Postseason baseball will be here before you know it. There's a lot going on in that department as well. If you've enjoyed our podcast, make sure you subscribe if you're watching on YouTube and like this video. If you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, make sure you follow our show. You can also give us a rating and a review. We really appreciate you being with us today. And